Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back once again to another session of our SOL review. Today we will be reviewing economics, and this is the introductory part to economics. So here's our two main objectives we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at these 2 points. So 11A, which states because of scarcity, consumers, producers, and government decision makers are forced to make choices. So scarcity basically is the unlimited want with the limited need. And people, corporations, governments are always going to have to choose between what they really want to have and what they really need because there's a limited amount of resources. Also, we're going to look at how every country must develop an economic system to determine how to use its limited productive resources. So remember, there's 4 kinds, and if you remember taking the test, when we actually completed this unit, you had to go through the 4 different types of economic systems, and you had to make a few decisions there as you're going forward. So we'll get started. And we'll take a look at our first slide here. So, like it says up here, because of scarcity, consumers, producers, and government decision makers are forced to make choices. So, like these graphics over here, we definitely have some choices we're going to have to make. There may be a situation where you have more people that want a particular good or service than what you actually have. So hopefully you don't have a ratio quite as bad as this one over here. But you will have to make some choices, and always make sure they're good choices. They're good for the common good of everybody, and that everyone will be able to benefit. So whenever you make something called a choice, you're actually making 2 choices. So this is because whenever you choose to do one thing, you're also choosing not to do something else. So what you choose not to do is something called your opportunity cost. So your opportunity cost may not necessarily be a bad thing. It just may not be something you can afford right now based on your limited resources as an individual, a business, or a government. So all choices are going to have opportunity costs, and opportunity costs are synonymous with consequences, and consequences can be good or bad. Opportunity costs could either be good or bad as well. So next point here, the problem that scarcity faces all individuals and organizations, including businesses and governments. So you may face scarcity or opportunity costs in your own personal decision. So like it says down here, we have unlimited wants, but our resources are limited. So for example, if you have, let's say, $5 in your pocket, that's all you have, and you're trying to decide, should I go and buy ice cream over at my favorite ice cream shop, or should I go down the road to the donut store? So the decision you will have to make is you either have to buy the ice cream or the donut because you don't have money for both. So if you chose ice cream and you decided not to have the donut would be your opportunity cost because that is what you decided to not purchase based on your resources, which is your money in this instance. So again, going to the next point here, the goods and services we want exceed our ability to produce them when we're talking about scarcity. So again, scarcity is going to force consumers, producers, and governments to make difficult choices. So maybe this is a bit of a ridiculous example, but if you have to choose between buying a house, or buying a Lamborghini, whatever you would choose obviously would be the one you're going to obtain, and then the one you do not choose would be your opportunity cost. So if you chose to live in a house versus buy a Lamborghini, the Lamborghini would be your opportunity cost. Or if you want to live out of your car for some reason, then the Lamborghini would be your choice and your house would be the opportunity cost. And they cost about the same in some areas. So anyway, the last point here is scarcity is the inability to satisfy all wants at the same times. Resources and goods are limited. Limited goods and resources require that choices must be made. So make sure they are good choices. Let's go to the next slide. So a few key terms here that are going to really apply to economics as a whole, and economics as, we're talking about individual or business or government. So first one here are resources. These are different factors that are of production. They are used in the production of goods and services. The types of resources are natural. So for example, like oil, or which can be refined into gasoline. Human, so all of us workers who are working to either produce something or to provide a service. And capital, so for example, if you were, in a restaurant, a capital resource would be an oven or a refrigerator, or the vending machine that you would have to serve drinks. So something physical that you buy, but you can use over and over again. The last one here on this point is entrepreneurship. So, or entrepreneurship rather. So entrepreneurship is the idea that people have to put together a business, to formulate a recipe, to come up with a plan. Really anything that is not actually physical or tangible, something you can sense right at the time, but it's definitely in the idea of the person who kind of starts up the whole business. So the next point here is choice. So again, choice is going to be selection of an item or action from a set of possible alternatives. So you have good choices, you have bad choices, you have consequences. You simply may have to choose because you don't have enough money at the time, right? So ice cream and donuts are not necessarily bad things unless you decide to eat a whole lot of it. But if you just decide to have a couple of scoops of ice cream and a donut, and you can't choose between either because you have limited resources, you may choose the ice cream now, but then the donut the next time. So you just have to decide what you can afford at the time. The next point here is opportunity cost. So this is, again, what is given up when the choice is made. So it may not necessarily be something that's bad you leave behind, just something you can't buy right now because you don't have enough resources or money to acquire that. The next point here is production. So this is the combining of all these different types of resources that are available to make goods, which is basically like stuff. Like a car would be a good, or a bicycle would be a good, or any kind of electronic device, TV, tablet, computer, cell phone would be a good. Or provide a service. So I don't know if you can think of any services off the top of your head, but it's basically something that someone does. So like plumbers, electricians, the furnace guys, the auto mechanics, or even people who are in even more educated because of degrees that they've acquired, like teachers, professors, even people who serve in government. They would provide services for people, so they wouldn't actually make something, but they would provide something, and that would be a service. So the last point here is going to be consumption. So it's the using of goods and services. So consumption is really the use of any good. So you may think like being a consumer or what you eat. You probably remember like in science class last year, you learned about different kinds of consumers, like herbivores and carnivores and omnivores and whatever other types of vores there are. But consumption in that sense would be eating, and from a certain perspective, we do spend a lot of time consuming food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks and whatever else. And if you drive down the road, a lot of our stores center around food. But consumption is really just the use of anything. So like your car consumes gasoline. You buy a cell phone, you consume it. Even though you don't actually physically eat it, you use it. So you're a consumer, and that's going through the act of consumption. So again, this is driven by preferences and price, and whatever you buy and use, you consume. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to look at the different kinds of or types of economic systems or structures that are out there. So as it says up here, every country must develop an economic system to determine how to use its limited productive resources. So economic systems are going to be a government's response to scarcity, because as plentiful as a nation is, they probably don't have everything that they absolutely need for everybody. So they will have to acquire resources from somewhere, and that is the government trying to figure out how to solve the problem of scarcity. So the key factor in determining the type of economy a country has is the extent of government involvement. So it's really a balance that you have to play here. And the next point here really explains it very simply. It says the greater amount of the decision making that is left to the individual, the closer the system is to a free market system. So free market, hopefully you remember, but just to refresh you a little bit, free market is a system of government, a system of economics where the government has little to basically no involvement or interaction or regulation on the market. So it's really up to the individuals who establish businesses, or in some cases establish big corporations, and they produce everything that the people of the country would need. So free market is very little government involvement, and a large portion, or almost a complete portion, of individual decision making. Now the next balance here on the way that a government can be involved in the economy is something called a centralized authority. So it's closer to a command system. There really aren't a whole lot of command systems left out there in the world since the fall of Soviet Empire back in 91. So the best example we have of a true command economy is North Korea. So hopefully you can remember when we watched that documentary from National Geographic on North Korea, where we followed the doctor who performed all the eye surgeries, and he was able to get a few tours of the area that surrounded the capital of North Korea. So, command economy, very strict, very little, and really North Korea basically no individual choice or freedoms whatsoever. So the basic questions of economics that any system has to face are these, and they're pretty simple. So what will be produced? So, what are you going to be producing? If you're, I don't know, like America, we produce a lot of corn, and we actually ship it all over the world. Also, we produce a lot of coal, and obviously we transport it around ourselves. We also share our resources from that as well. So, thinking about how will it be produced. So, how many, plants am I going to have? How many workers are going to be involved? What are going to be the regulations involved? Next point here is for whom will it be produced? So, if you're making cell phones for people to buy over in China, then you have to think about how you're going to get it over there. So how are you going to ship things back and forth? Logistics. Last point here is each type of economy answers the basic questions differently. So let's look at these. The first one here is kind of old school. It's traditional economy. Economic decisions are based on custom and historical precedent. So I don't know if you're familiar with this time in history, but think of the time before we had big industry, a lot of farmers, a lot of people were tradesmen, like tailors and cobblers, the shoe people, and bakers and butchers, and the candlestick maker, and all these other people. So that was really built on a really small system, and you are going to do what the job that your father did, your grandfather did, your great-grandfather did. So you're probably not going to change a whole lot. So as it says here, people perform the same type of work as their parents and grandparents, regardless of ability or potential. So there's not a whole lot of room for growth here. Basically, what you do as a child is probably what you do as an adult, because that's what your parents did and probably what your grandparents did as well. Really old system, not too common in the world anymore. The next system we're going to just briefly look at here is the free market economy. And a lot of countries today are moving towards the free market economy model. Now, there's different adaptations of that model, but this is the general idea. So you have private or individual ownership of property resources, so you own your own land, your own stuff. The next thing here is profit. So hopefully you remember what profit is. But profit is the ability to earn money as a business beyond what you pay for your initial good or service and pay for taxes, and then you have some money left over, and that's your profit. So, if you're exporting oil, obviously, the oil isn't exactly free to produce as a country, even though you may own the business, because you have to buy equipment, you have to pay the workers, you have to pay taxes, you have to pay shipping costs. So, also you have to package it in a barrel, you have to pay for the barrel. So there's all those different things that are involved with getting the oil ready to sell. And then once you sell it, you want to sell it for a little bit higher than what it cost you to produce, because you want to make profit. So you want to make money on your investment. The next point here is competition. So you are competing with other people who may be producing other similar items. There's a lot of cell phones out there, TVs, computers, cars, shoes, sports clothes, you name it. There's all kinds of different things out there that are very similar, but not exactly the same because they're owned by different people. So it's competitive business. Next point here is consumer sovereignty. If you're a Latin scholar, you may recognize the word sovereign. So basically it kind of means like a ruler or a king. So the consumer is the ruler or king of what is being bought and sold, supply and demand. So these decisions that a lot of governments are going to make are going to be based on what people would like to have, especially in a free market economy. There's individual choice with minimal government involvement in the economy. So those are your first two models, and here's the next two models we're going to look at. We're almost done for today. The next model we're going to look at is the command economy, and this is central ownership or federal ownership or government ownership of property and resources. So people really are not going to own much of anything, or maybe they may not own anything at all. Back in the old Soviet Union days, people really didn't own a house. Actually, no one really owned a house. It all belonged to the government, so everybody rented their house, and it really wasn't, for the most part, a house. It was like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, and it was really not that great. So next point here is a centrally planned economy. So the government plans everything. The government allocates all the money. The government pays all the people. The government sets all the prices for the goods. The government negotiates with all the other foreign countries. The government tells you what to do, what not to do, how to do it. So there's a lot of rules involved, and there's not much, if any, individual choice. Next point here is lack of consumer choice. Again, I think I just mentioned that before, but they really don't have much selection, if any selection, in a lot of goods. The next one here we're going to look at is something called a mixed economy, and this is what most countries in the world are today. They're somewhere between command and free market, so they're like a mix, they're a blend. It just depends on what ratio, what percentage, what amount they have of free market and command. So, first point here, individuals and businesses are owners and decision makers for the private sector, and the government is owner and decision maker for the public sector. So, really, the government and individuals have to decide who owns what and who's going to take care of which portion. And once they decide that, then you'll be able to have a clearly established, role for people operating as individuals, free the government and government involvement. So again, just a couple points to recap here. The government's role is greater than in a free market and is less than in a command economy. All right. So most economies today, including the United States, are going to be mixed economies. So our nation has a mix, and it does have elements of both free and command economies. So there we go. Got a few wrap-up questions for you here. We're almost done, so just think about this before you hit pause here. So, which economic concept forces choices to be made is our first question. Just think for a minute. Okay, good. It's going to be scarcity. So remember, you can't have everything you want because those are unlimited. Or typically there's more wants than there are what you can buy. So that makes scarcity. What must every country choose to implement for its citizens? It has to come up with an economic system. And there are 4 different economic systems that governments adopt to run their country. So the first one here, which government depends on its people performing the same jobs generation after generation? That would be traditional economy. So you would do the same job as the generation before you and generation before that. You probably own the same land, do the same thing, own the same shops, or what depending on whatever you would do. So it's kind of repetitive. 2 advantages of this would be, for the most part, you're kind of like a private business owner, so you have your own business, and there's not going to be a whole lot of people telling you what to do besides paying taxes. Also, for the most part, there's job security. So, I mean, if you're farming, really the only thing that's going to lay you off or fire you from your job would be like a drought or famine or disease or something really horrible coming through. So, for the most part, you're probably going to do what you keep doing. 2 disadvantages are you're probably not going to earn a whole lot of profit since you may not really be in a good area to make money, depending on where you have your business located. Also, there's not really a lot of room for you to move up since your job doesn't really depend on education or really how hard you're working there. The next one here, which government makes all the choices for its people? That would be a command economy. 2 advantages would be there really is not much in the way of unemployment. Basically, everybody would have a job and everybody would have the same kind of thing. So there really wouldn't be a lot of jealousy or envy because everybody would be kind of in the same boat. Disadvantages, it's really because of those 2 things. If you are a janitor and you're a professor, you're probably going to get paid the same, almost equally. And another disadvantage is you all have to live in the same house. So if your house is bad, well, there's not another option for you. So there you go. Next point here, which government makes little to no choices for its people? That would be free market. 2 advantages is that you would have lower taxes and you would have less regulation to deal with from the government. 2 disadvantages, it would be risky. So if you lost your business, well, that's it. You better start another one or find something else fast because there's not really anything else. It's going to hold you up. There's no pension or any kind of welfare program that's going to support you. Another disadvantage would be the responsibility for running the country and finances of the country and making sure everything needs to happen would really rest on more private hands. So depending or not how well people can manage that may be a problem down the road, but it may not. So you have to see who's in charge. The last one here, which government makes some choices for its people? That would be a mixed economy. 2 advantages is that you have a balance of private and public, which is individual and government. So the government could probably take care of some national security issues, whereas the private people could take care of money issues. Another advantage would be it's negotiable. So the government may be stronger at one point, and then business owners may be like, hey, we really need control over this area, or we'd like to have more influence in this sector. So how about you employ us, or you just let us take it over. So it's negotiable. Disadvantages would be you still have a sizable amount of government control, depending on whether or not there's a large portion of the economy that's controlled by the government. So there's always that risk for the government to grow bigger. Also, another disadvantage would be that there may not be a job for everybody, since this again has some elements of free market, so it's competitive, and if you aren't in it to win it, you may lose. So anyway, there you go. That's just a quick run through on economics. And now that you're done looking over these this presentation, feel free to go back if you missed anything and fill it back in. Make sure you save these notes because we're almost done. We have one more class after this, and then we're going to be done with our review for the SOLs. And now that you've completed this, please go back to the agenda on Google Classroom and take a look and see what's next. Thank you for listening and paying attention, and have a great day. Thanks. Bye.